TGIF, everybody. I guess the question is who brought their beer? Is it just me?
I think it might just be you, Tony.
All right, let me do the.
It looks like you have a lot to choose from behind you there, too.
I really do, and
Yeah,
you know what? There's one brand that's missing. If you take a very close look,
that's true. We need to
we're,
get you some ice cream, too.
I we've been driving a long way to get the ice cream. I got to be honest. We have to go about an hour to a Food Lion, but we do get it. We have been able to find it, but I do need a drop ship of Osena. All right, so Chris, this is your fault. You're the one who said, I'm celebrating 5 years having left corporate.
Hmm?
And for most of the food and beverage entrepreneurs that I've talked to, this is a journey they've all been on. And I just want to tell people who may not know this, totally, I think, very unique. All you guys, and by the way, we're down Mike. Mike's what stuck on a flight somewhere and he couldn't make it, right? So you guys all met at Wharton and you both companies started around a tropical fruit. I mean, that in and of itself.
We have all the same flavors too.
I think it's great. So look, you started this. You said, oh, I'm going, 5 years having left corporate. So congratulations. You've pulled the Band-Aid off, I guess, right?
Yeah. It's a good point that you bring up, Tony. I think what inspired me to kind of reflect on this was there are definitely a lot of people in the food and beverage entrepreneurship space who got their training in corporate America, right? There are probably two big camps of entrepreneurs. It's like the people who are like, I had a lemonade stand from the time I was 7 years old, and entrepreneurship has been my thing. And that's all they ever wanted to do. And there are other people who sort of follow a more traditional path, go to universities that funnel you into these professionally defined career paths. Mm-hmm. You'll go through your first like 5 to 10 years of your career, go get your MBA, end up with a higher job, and blah, 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 kind of go from there, but then take a veer off into entrepreneurship, right? And the three of us all are from that second path. And as a result, we have a really unique, rounded experience of having been in the corporate world, seeing what it takes to succeed there, and then come into the entrepreneurial world and to see what it takes to succeed here. And they're vastly different skill sets. They're both really positive and negative in their own ways. And I thought it was a good, interesting thing to talk about because I know a lot of people who are in the corporate world want, always think about getting into entrepreneurship. I think it's interesting for us to share that perspective.
Yeah. So who wants to start? So why do it? I mean, because I think there's a myth. I think there's a huge myth that if you're in corporate, it's safer. To me, that's my personal opinion, that you're safer in corporate. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, just, and for anyone who doesn't have the background, Chris and I are the founders of Osena Spiked Coconut Water. And it's basically a canned alcoholic coconut water. And we got started with it about 4 years ago. I would say that as far as corporate, the corporate path goes, there's some real benefits as far as understanding and learning about structure, because for many things, for many business functions, there is roughly a right way to do things. For example, finance, compliance. You can learn a ton about marketing and sales as well from like these more corporate companies, because they've just tried a lot of things. They found a lot of things that work. That's why they become these massive companies to begin with.
True.
And I think there's a lot to learn as far as, okay, they've created these massive organizations that function really well. They're profitable, but what ends up, for people who are very, not necessarily all ambitious people, but some people who are ambitious in wanting to see their own vision and having control over their own vision come to life. Those people may feel like things just move slower than they'd want it to in the corporate world. And sometimes your goals don't align with the corporation's goals, and you have issues as a result of that. And that makes it so that you feel like you want to start something else. And that was actually something that I felt working at Anheuser-Busch. I worked at Anheuser-Busch before starting Osena with Chris. And I felt like they just needed the opportunity to be very, very big for it to be worth pursuing. And that makes perfect sense from their point of view. If it's not $1 billion opportunity, it's not moving the needle. But there's a lot of $100 million opportunities that are really exciting, really interesting, that they just don't have. It's just not worth it for them to even dedicate anyone to go after. But if you're a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, you capture $100 million opportunity. That's massive. You created a massive amount of value for yourself, for your partners, and investors. And so that to me is, I think, a big reason why I decided, okay, like, I think that there are these really cool $100 million plus opportunities that are available, but you can't do it in the corporate, in a large corporation.
And they're yours. You can go after it. Well, I mean, Vedant, you left what, McKinsey? I mean, that was one of the companies you worked for. So you were doing consulting. So you probably saw a lot of different companies and styles and structures as a consultant.
Oh, 100%, Tony. So I worked for McKinsey for a year and a half, but I worked for 3 years for Blackstone, which is now, private equity investment. And I think the biggest thing that struck me was always meeting those founders and listening to their stories. Now, Blackstone is, of course, the largest alternate investment firm with $1 trillion in AUM. So the investment would be over $100 million, right? So you would meet entrepreneurs whose companies are valued at $500 billion or more. And when you hear their stories and their journey, I just saw it very, very fascinating. And when you think about life in general and kind of remove the career aspect to it, but particularly these days with the longevity, we have a president, 82-year-old, right? Like people can be president at 80. So you have a long period of your life. So I think it's important to kind of think about decades in your career. And when you start an entrepreneurship journey, I think the first thing which you need to tell yourself is this is not a 2-year stint at a McKinsey or a 3-year stint at a Blackstone. This is a 10-year stint. And I think we start in decades. And I think, nothing in entrepreneurship, whenever you talk about, you should definitely mention saying by the best entrepreneur, which is Steve Jobs, right? And I think somebody asked Steve Jobs that he's not very easy to work with. So Steve Jobs said, if you want to make everybody happy, sell ice creams. And I think that is why me and Mike, we said, okay, let's make everybody
We want to
happy.
make everybody happy.
Start selling ice cream, right? I think that's what it is. But I think it's more than just a career decision. I think Vicente was right. With McKinsey and Blackstone, when you work with institutions, and both Chris and Vicente have worked with great institutions, you see how complex the institution is, and you kind of start appreciating the value of those institutions. And then when you start afresh, your drawing board with a white piece of paper, there is no process or no system. The first day in the job of an entrepreneur, there is no institution. And you are basically building block for over 10 years, and somebody after that will build it. And so the institution, I think you really understand the longevity and the complexity of all of it. And you start appreciating the fact of entities that are institutions bigger than people and how valuable they are as in our society today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And Tony, to kind of bring it back to your original point, I think about it being perhaps less safe than, or the concept of corporate life being not being safe, being somewhat of a fallacy. So I think the point that I would want to make about that is that entrepreneurship is not just a career path in a sense that it is also a skill set. And I think that when you are working for a large organization that pays you every 2 weeks or every week or every month, you are somewhat subject to factors that are outside of your control, whether it be like your own promotion decision or that organization's management of their funds or macroeconomic conditions. There's a lot of things like that, right? you can always benefit, in my opinion, from learning to make money for yourself as a skill set, right? If the option of having a job was taken off the table, and you were just operating in society, would you be able to make it for yourself and be able to provide for yourself and those around you? So I think the earlier you can do that in your career, to learn entrepreneurship as a skill and feel comfortable saying, okay, I can look at opportunities in the market, design a business to capture value, and try to use it to, make some sort of societal benefit and also benefit for yourself. It's a very empowering feeling. So, I see that as a lifelong pursuit. I feel like all three of us, although we've been in entrepreneurship for 4 years, 5 years, I think in Vedant's case, still on the first chapter of a lifelong book of being entrepreneurs. And it's a very nice feeling to know that we now have the ability to kind of look at the market, see opportunities, create businesses and products to help fulfill that value. And I would advise or advocate for those in corporate type jobs, if they feel comfortable developing that skill set, even if they have a job, and if they're gainfully employed, find ways to develop your entrepreneurial skill set early on in your career, and it will really benefit you long term.
Honestly, that's great that you put it that way, as a skill set. Let's see. I think we've got a question here. Looking back, was there a moment that you thought, I know I can do this, or I have to do this? Like maybe accomplish this inside a corporate before leaving the corporate world, or was it gradual? How did you?
So for me, there, I did not have a eureka moment. I mean, also because Vicente is the inventor of our business, so that's one thing. But I will say, like, I think there is kind of this conception of either like a period of dissatisfaction in the corporate world or an idea that you feel a conviction to go after. I felt neither of those things. What I actually did feel, and this is probably the section of the live stream here where I advocate for, where I give like Wharton a free commercial. But one thing that I felt really cool about being at business school, and there's a lot of downsides to business school too, I will say, but one thing that I felt about being there is just being in an environment with doers and people who are bold and take risks, and took this like, $150,000 a year risk in their career to go back to business school and really further their goals. Inspires you, because I think you're in an environment where there's a bias toward, rather than just kind of putting your dreams up on a whiteboard, like actually going out and trying to see them through for a nice 2-year period where you're not doing anything else. So that was kind of for me is, well, maybe it's not I have to go do this, I have to go do this, but it's I have to go do this now because I'm here and I'm surrounded by smart people who are biased toward doing things.
Yeah, it's like it was being incubated, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and I definitely also felt like there was this great opportunity in business school where, I have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs who start their ventures at the same time that they're doing a full-time job, because it's so difficult. You need to have so much energy to be able to get started with that. And we had the flexibility that we were in business school, and many of the classes, for instances, allowed us to work on our businesses, on our business idea as part of class credit. So you're writing a marketing plan for your marketing class. We were able to do it for Osena. And so that kind of thing really helped give us the time to do it. As far as the question goes, I think that, I always wanted to do something I always wanted to start my own business. Like my father's been a lifelong entrepreneur. So I knew it was something that I wanted to do. And I did feel like the limiting factor was both a really good idea and one that I felt confident that I could execute on. And at Anheuser-Busch, I saw what it took to start a new beverage, and I saw the step-by-step process. And that's really what gave me the confidence, alongside, being at the forefront of all these trends and all these changes in the alcohol industry. Those two things together made me feel like, okay, spiked coconut water is an incredible idea that, is really going to push the envelope in better for you alcohol. And at the same time, I think I can, I'm pretty sure I can make it because of what I've seen in the business. And if I didn't have the experience at Anheuser-Busch, I would have said, I have no idea how to make a spiked coconut water. So that there's no way, even if I think of the idea, I'm not going to just go and start it. So I think that you do need a little bit of, you don't need like 10 years in the industry to understand enough. Like, I think you need to know enough to know who you need to talk to and work with to be able to create something. But you do need that knowledge.
Yeah. And to that point also, like, I think Vedant probably will be able to speak to this much better than I, but some of the best entrepreneurs that I've seen are consultants, because they get to work on so many different projects and work in so many different industries for really compressed periods of time. And they're always working on problems, right? So if you think about business, you're trying to solve a problem. That's why most of the entrepreneurs that I've seen who have these really like obscure ideas where I'm like, how did you think of this idea? They may have encountered it when they were consultants.
100%. I think, you make it an interesting point. How do you make this decision that you want to start your own business? I think it doesn't happen at one eureka moment. I think you plan for it over years. I think for me, it was always seeing those entrepreneurs. But the big question you ask yourself, and I think Vicente pointed in that direction, was, when should I take the leap of faith? Should I take it today? Should I take it 10 years from now? Should I take it 20 years from now? Because if you look at the success rate of entrepreneurs, the longer you spend time in a particular industry, the more likely are you to identify a white space, to build your network, to capitalize on that white space. So you generally see a very high number of entrepreneurs at the age of 45 to 55. And the success rate is dramatically different, right? And then you see a lot of entrepreneurs at the initial, which is like more hungry, more hustly. I think most of us, and Vicente and Chris, of course, had some experience in that industry. Me and Mike were just consultants, right? My cumulative experience in grocery in the US is from 2018, right? Because that's when I moved to the US. So I had no idea of what a grocery store is, what else is. So you have to kind of learn a lot. I think I definitely would say, on the hindsight, I underestimated the problems in the learning curve.
That's an honest assessment.
Oh, absolutely. And I think most humans, we do underestimate short-term problems or short-term rewards. So I think we did that big time. And I think you always do that because you don't know what you don't know. Having said that, I think you don't make a decision at one point, and you take some time and you just go with it. And there is always a risk of not having, your job the next day, or not being able to make the payment. Goes for years and years. But at some point in time, you just are able to work with that uncertainty. Because I think the biggest shift from a corporate to an entrepreneur is, how do you manage that uncertainty, and how do you manage your relearning of this entire new thing, which you have no leaders or no partners or no bosses to explain to you how things happen. I think these two are the biggest learning. I think over time, you train yourself to understand that anxiety. Over time, you build a series of network and people like Tony, like yourself, or certain people, or within other entrepreneurs, create a group, and you kind of start matching. All of that takes time. So you kind of have to have patience.
Yeah, you got to have your trusted network to go to when you have those issues. That's one of the other areas I was thinking back on when I started my business too, is that I was thinking, did I want to call it emotional support? I had family support behind me, and I thought that was very important, because I did leave corporate, I did leave something to start up. But there's a question that came through, but before I ask it, I do want to go back to that entrepreneurship as a skill set. That is that I feel like that's something that we could really spend a lot of time on. Can each of you just tell me what you think, your own opinion, what's one of the greatest skill sets that you need for your job in entrepreneurship? Just, I'm kind of curious what
I can sum it up in one word. I would say sales. That is like the elemental core of everything I feel like you do as an entrepreneur, whether it be, and I can give 3 examples, right? So sales, in just sales. Okay. So like everybody who buys Osena, I have to convince 3 different people to buy it in order to get a consumer sale. Or I have to convince a distributor to buy it, a retailer to buy it, and I have to convince the consumer to buy it after that. Right. Then investors. So when it comes to getting an investor, I have to sell them on my vision. I have to sell them on myself. I have to sell them on Vicente. I have to sell them on our product. And then even when it comes to like operational side, in order for Vicente and I to get a manufacturing facility, we had to sell them on the long-term vision of Osena as a partner for them. So there's like everything that you
Never,
do.
every step, right? Every step is sales.
It's not only are you selling a product, you're selling a future, you're selling a vision, you're selling a story bigger than yourself. So getting really good at sales is extremely important to every part of the entrepreneurial journey, without fail.
As I was mentioning the support, Amy Clausen jumped in and said, we all need the support. She's the CEO of Caprimo, and she was on the podcast a while back, and she's got like the hottest cupcake bakery in all of Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And
sounds delicious.
Very, very tough
right now.
I mean, literally, and everything is scratch. So very, very tough. You need lots of people around you to pull that off. I've got a couple more questions that come in, but I want to, Vedant, would you add anything to that, Vicente? I mean, he said sales. What else?
Chris very, very nicely pointed out sales. And I think there's one quality I would like to kind of, to sell your entrepreneur, to sell your employees, to sell your customers, to sell your retailers. There's one thing which is very important, which is your conviction in yourself and your idea. I think as you move in entrepreneurship, you realize idea is more of a commodity and execution is more of the skill set. And then you realize that, however great your idea looks at the paper, bringing it to vision.
That's the hard part.
Far difficult than, and then you have to, and when you sell to everybody, as Chris was mentioning, you're not just selling the idea. You're selling that I have the ability to execute on this idea.
To execute on it, right?
When I go and I have to pitch to Walmart or anybody, I tell them, we have the ability to get customers to buy this product. It's not about how tasty the ice cream is. It's very difficult to make a non-delicious ice cream. It's very difficult. It's just always going to taste very good. So, but so what, right?
Right. So what?
So does every other ice cream. How are you going to convince? So I think that execution part is so underrated. We think about Airbnbs, or we think about Facebook, so we think about this brilliant idea. But, we massively underestimate the execution that went behind it, that conviction the founder had on himself, his team, and he built that conviction into a series of investors, employees, customers, and everybody. So I think that is very important.
I think you nailed it too. I feel like I live that every day, executing on the idea. That is huge. We've got a couple more questions that have come in. I don't know. Vicente, did you want to add something to that before?
The last thing I'd add to that is persistence, and really just, having the strength to get up every day and keep pushing towards your goal. And, it really combines what Vedant and Chris said. I think that having the sales and the conviction are key. And, but it takes a lot longer than you think a lot of the time. I mean, we were in R&D for 18 months, just R&D. And so it can take a very long time, but that also is what separates the people who kind of start off, they think it's a great idea, but ultimately, how many years am I going to do this for?
And then they fade off because they don't. Yeah.
And then you've stuck around, and a lot of the time that's really kind of what makes the difference.
I think this is a very honest question. You want to go back? You want to go back to the corporate world? I would probably modify that question and say, what would it take to make you go back? Not have you considered it, but what has to happen to force you back into corporate?
So, you know, honestly, I think so my thing I've always kind of said, I've honestly counseled some people with founder aspirations to think about this and in terms of like their overall journey. I'm an advocate for doing both as long as you possibly can. I know it's really hard. I know not a lot of people have, people have obligations outside work with family or, other things that preclude them from doing that. I'm an advocate of doing both as long as you possibly can. I know we didn't do it, but I think that the longer you can hold financial stress out of the startup founder picture, I think the better you will be. I think that there are a lot of I would say mistakes or misguided decisions that Vicente and I have had to make over the course of our now 4-year journey because we needed to treat Osena as our primary source of salary and our primary source of income. Where if we had dependable income in the background, we could have managed the business slightly differently. So the one thing I would say is obviously just financial stress of being a startup founder is probably for all of the one day founders out there, it's probably 5x what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly, I mean, if you think about it, every line item in the business has to get paid before you get paid, right? So if any one of those pipes is leaking, you're going to bear the brunt of it. And are you prepared for that? And I say this in an incredibly, I would say not privileged position, but in just a unique position that I don't have, I'm not married. I don't have children. There's nobody depending on me for food, right? It's just myself.
That's a good point. That's a good point. The financial stress is a little less.
Yeah, you have to weigh all those things. I mean, it's not necessarily just pie in the sky. Like, you have to weigh the fact that you're living a life, right? Like, your work is just one component of your life. You have to weigh all of those things. Are you willing to take on the risk in order to achieve this entrepreneurial goal, or do you want to kind of defray that risk and pursue relatively risk-free, something on the side, and then see if you can turn it into a source of income over time?
Yeah.
No, I think Chris, you said very, very, very correctly, but just to kind of rephrase, you go back to corporate the day the stress, the financial stress, inhibits you to focus in your business, in building the business, because in that moment you will never be able to build a business, because if you're not stable, if you're not confident, if you're not secure financially, if you're not doing your basic responsibilities, the day you feel that, I think it's time probably to go back to corporate, or even if not corporate, stable income job or supplementary income, because there is very fine line between how much you can take for how long, and it is so personal to everybody depending upon their personal situation, their family background, their other things, immigration, non-immigration. There's so many things which are different. The day you feel that all of those burden are completely distracting you from your building business, that day you should go back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting too, because both of your companies, you both have co-founders. So it's not like you can make that decision in a vacuum. I mean, you can make it in a vacuum, but if you're relying on the other person who's helping you with the business and they want to pull out, I mean, that becomes another,
Yeah. I mean, I recall back to so many of the classes that we had at school about business failure or startup failure. And I think by far the number one source of startup failure was co-founder misalignment or personality match. So I would say a positive co-founder relationship is pretty rare. And if you can find someone you can start a business with, Vicente and I were roommates together, and that was kind of when we realized we wanted to start a business together, because managing a household is somewhat like managing a business.
You didn't kill each other as roommates, so you figured, I think we can do this.
Vedant and Mike is a slightly different story, but that's another thing is these things are all incredibly personal, but you know, if you are running a 2-person or 3-person business, you are not making decisions on an island.
Well, look, guys, I think we're kind of getting toward the end of our time. So I'd like to kind of wrap with what would you say has been the biggest change you've seen in yourself over the past 3-5 years as a result of your new life as an entrepreneur? What do you think, Vicente? What's like the looking back at yourself, what's changed and maybe developed the most?
I think I think what's changed the most has been I guess I'm maybe when I was in the corporate world, like I was more worried about being polite and not ruffling people's feathers. And like after being co-founder, running a business for several years, like I'm just much more forward with people from the get-go. And maybe I try not to come off as rude. Maybe sometimes it comes off as rude, but I find that
Chris is smiling.
I can think of a couple times with some partners that he was pretty good on towing the line. It's good.
Yeah. Like it does feel like the risk of I don't want to waste, like, let's say I want to do a partnership with someone and I feel like I'm the one who's benefiting more than the other person. You might feel like, you kind of want to kind of almost like weasel your way into the partnership where, you start to have conversations. Now it's like just straight from the get-go. This is what I'm looking for. Does this interest you? Because it just makes things much faster. And if you get alignment in the beginning, then you're much more
that's
likely.
good advice. That's actually great advice.
And it's something that maybe I wasn't like that before, but I find that it makes me, I think I'm a more effective communicator as a result.
It sounds like it's also more transparent.
Right.
As a result, it's a little more transparent. What about you, Vedant? What do you think?
I think, Tony, the biggest thing is when I used to work for McKinsey and Blackstone, there used to be a tag associated with me, a tag of good respect, which actually was not me, but McKinsey and Blackstone. I think the biggest change that has happened is I have lost those tags. What does that mean? That means basically nobody cares about me. And that has made me so much more humble. Like none of the buyers, they care about Frutero. Frutero is very, very small percentage of their overall revenue. But at the same time, when I was at McKinsey, and we would work or Blackstone cutting the check, we would meet CEOs. I would meet CEOs, right?
Yeah.
All the time. And now nobody cares. What has that done is just how humble it has made me, and trying to understand other people's perspective and trying to kind of, really tell them about Frutero and understand, I do not have a negotiation ability with them. They're much higher. That's how things are.
Right,
But at the same time,
whoop.
yeah, exactly. It's the chairs are reversed. And,
Chris knows that coming out of J&J. I mean, you're J&J, man. You're here. Everyone else is please.
Yeah.
You're right, Vedant. The negotiation power. Yeah, you feel very small. You feel very. How about you, Chris? You wrap it up since you kind of had this idea in the first place. What's
Yeah. I mean, outside of I got a bunch of tattoos that I couldn't get when I was in corporate. That's
there you go.
Maybe the biggest.
You have more time for powerlifting, right? You're still powerlifting, right?
I was trying that when I was in corporate too,
Right.
but maybe less successfully. But the biggest thing for me is just it goes back to the point that I was saying about entrepreneurship as a skill set. If you view the world through a slightly different lens, I would say. And Vicente and I have done that too, where like we look at emerging industries and we ideate on what potential solutions those could be. Those feel a lot closer to being in my wheelhouse than they would have been when I was trained to do a job, right? I think when you're in your annual goals and objectives for your corporate job, you tend to view the world and like, this is the world for me, and I gotta, I can't necessarily, like, those will be the builders outside the walls of my company, and I'll just watch what people are creating. When you're in this world, it's really empowering to say, AI is an emerging technology. Could I incorporate that into my business or a future venture? And if so, how would I go about doing that? Right. So many of the people that I looked up to in the world as just like cultural figures growing up were entrepreneurs and builders, like people who created these great, amazing things. Like my business hero is Walt Disney. So like, I mean, I look at him like created something from something so humble as an animation studio. Right. So like, now looking at myself as an entrepreneur and as a builder, it really does kind of change the way you see the world. And it's pretty intoxicating to say, future technologies, future societal changes, I can play a role in building those. I'm building the future and in shaping the world that I want in the future, even if it's just in some small way as creating, delicious ice cream and cocktails to start. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great, guys. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed. And everyone enjoy the rest of their Friday. And with whatever you're doing, TGIF.
Cheers.
Cheers. And I need a resupply, first of all. And I got to make it about an hour over to Food Line to find some more of that delicious.
Oh, Tony, where are you? We also start selling in Harris Teeter and Publix, if that's nearer to you.
I'm in the farthest western reaches of North Carolina. Nothing comes over here except bass fishermen. That's about it. That's it right here. That's it. I am literally in here. There is nothing. So, guys, great seeing y'all. You're an inspiration to all the entrepreneurs. Thank you for taking some time out. And TGIF.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Chris, for organizing this. Bye, Vicente.
Have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Tony.
See ya.